Somewhere in the Great Lakes right now, in the cold, dark water below where the boats pass, there is a fish that was alive during the American Civil War. Not a descendant of a fish from back then. The same fish. The same animal. Still breathing, still feeding, still slowly moving along the bottom in water people swim in every summer, having done nothing for the last 160 years but grow older and heavier in the dark. It sounds like a tall tale. It is not. It is one of the best documented facts in American freshwater biology. And the animal is not some exotic creature from the deep ocean. It is a lake sturgeon, a fish your grandfather could have caught, living in the same lakes as the jet skis and the lake house docks and the summer camps. And the story of how it got to be that old, and how it very nearly did not survive to tell it, is one of the strangest and darkest stories in the history of these lakes. If this is the kind of thing that keeps your mind turning after dark, subscribe now. It takes 2 seconds. Because to understand the fish that outlived the Civil War, you have to go back to a time when these lakes held so many of them that people considered it a disaster. Now, let us go under. Start with the animal itself, because almost nothing about it works the way a fish is supposed to. The lake sturgeon is a living fossil, and that is not a figure of speech. Its family has existed for over 100 million years, which means the shape of this animal, the long armored body, the rows of bony plates down its back instead of scales, the shovel of a snout, the 4 whiskers trailing beneath it, was already swimming in fresh water while dinosaurs walked the shore above it. It watched them appear, and it watched them vanish. When the asteroid struck and wiped out most life on Earth, the sturgeon simply kept swimming. It is older, as a design, than trees that flower. It is older than snakes, and it grows to match its lineage. A full-grown lake sturgeon can pass 7 feet in length and weigh over 200 pounds, moving along the lake bottom like a slow armored submarine, vacuuming up small food with a mouth that extends from beneath its head like a tube. It does not hunt. It does not threaten anything. It is one of the gentlest giants in all of North American water, and it lives, when it is left alone, longer than almost any other animal on the continent. The females are the ancient ones. A female lake sturgeon may not even begin to reproduce until she is in her 20s, and once she does not spawn every year. She spawns once every 4 years, sometimes once every 9. It is one of the slowest reproductive cycles of any fish in North America, and it is the single fact that explains everything that is about to go wrong. Because an animal that takes 20 years to breed, and breeds only a handful of times across a century of life, is built for one thing: stability, a long, slow, unchanging world. It is an animal with no defense whatsoever against sudden change, and in the 1800s, sudden change arrived. Here is where the story turns dark, and it turns darker than you are likely ready for. When European settlers spread across the Great Lakes, the sturgeon was everywhere. At its height, biologists believe the Great Lakes held something on the order of 15 million lake sturgeon. They massed in the rivers by the thousands during spawning runs so thick you could, by the accounts of the time, nearly walk across the water on their backs. And the people who had come to fish these lakes for whitefish and trout looked at this abundance of ancient giants and saw not a wonder, but a nuisance. The sturgeon were enormous and strong enough to drag a boat, and they tore through fishing nets, wrecking expensive gear meant for other fish. So they were treated as vermin. They were hauled out by the thousands and stacked on the shore to rot. They were dried and burned as fuel. There are records of steamboats burning stacked sturgeon in their boilers, of the fish piled like cordwood and set alight along the banks, killed not for food, not for money, but simply for being in the way. An animal that had survived 100 million years was being used as kindling. And then, almost overnight, that reversed. Someone discovered the sturgeon was valuable after all. Its flesh could be smoked, its eggs could be sold as caviar, its swim bladder could be made into a product for clarifying wine and beer. The same fish that had been burned as trash became, within a few short years, one of the most valuable catches in the lakes, and the slaughter that followed was on a scale that is genuinely hard to hold in the mind. Consider one single number. In the year 1885, commercial crews pulled 8.5 million pounds of lake sturgeon out of the Great Lakes in 1 year. Now hold that against what happened just over 4 decades later. By 1928, the total catch for the entire year had collapsed to 2,000 pounds. From 8.5 million to 2,000. That is not a decline. That is the sound of an entire ancient population being emptied out of the water almost completely, inside the span of a single human lifetime. The dams made it worse. As the rivers that fed the lakes were dammed for mills and power, the sturgeon on their spawning runs massed helplessly at the base of the barriers, unable to reach the gravel beds upstream where they had spawned for millennia. They gathered there in crowds, bashing at the concrete with their snouts, and crews simply harvested them where they piled up. The one behavior that had sustained them for 100 million years, the great synchronized return to the spawning rivers, had been turned into the perfect trap. And because of that slow, patient reproductive cycle, the damage did not stop when the killing slowed. An animal that only breeds every several years, starting at age 20, cannot bounce back. The fish that were killed took their unborn generations with them. By the early 1900s, across huge stretches of their range, the lake sturgeon was simply gone, regionally extinct in river after river. In some of the Great Lakes, reduced to less than 1% of what it had been. The giant that outlived the dinosaurs had been brought to the edge of extinction not by an asteroid, but by about 50 years of human appetite. Which brings us back to the fish in the cold water below the boats, and why its survival is close to a miracle. Because a few of them made it, scattered, isolated, in the deepest and most remote water. A small number of these ancient animals survived the slaughter, and they did the one thing they have always done. They kept swimming, slowly, patiently, waiting out the catastrophe the way they had waited out every other one. And some of the individuals alive in the Great Lakes today are old enough that they were hatched in the middle of all of it, or before it. Biologists who recovered a sturgeon from these waters have aged individual fish at around 100 years old, meaning that fish hatched around the year 1910, when the slaughter was still underway. And because the species can push past a century, and because the largest and oldest are the hardest to catch and study, it is entirely sound to say that somewhere in these lakes swims an animal whose life reaches back before the Civil War. An animal that has personally outlived the entire era that nearly destroyed its kind. Think about what that fish has been present for. It was alive before the electric light was common. It was in the water when the Model T was new, through 2 world wars, through the entire span of modern America, doing nothing the whole time but growing slowly older in the dark, while on the surface above it, a country rose and changed beyond recognition. And here's the part that ties it together, the part worth carrying out of the water with you. We nearly destroyed this animal for one simple reason. We could not see it. It lived on the bottom, out of sight, and so it was easy to treat the lake as ours, to pull 15 million ancient lives out of the water and burn them on the shore without ever really grasping what we were doing, because none of it happened where we could watch. The sturgeon did not hide from us. It was simply beneath the surface, where we do not look, and being unseen very nearly cost it everything. Today, it is slowly coming back. Commercial fishing for it is banned in the United States. Across the Great Lakes, people who once would have burned it now raise young sturgeon by hand and carry them back to the rivers that their ancestors were locked out of. And there are goals, real ones, for self-sustaining populations, again within our lifetimes. It is one of the few genuinely hopeful turns in this whole story. But the animal at the center of it is still down there, still slow, still ancient, still almost never seen. The next time you are floating on a quiet Great Lake, remember what is below you. Not a legend, not a story. A living thing that was here before your country was whole, that watched an entire century pass from the cold, dark bottom, and that is, against every odd, still swimming. If this is the kind of thing that keeps your mind turning after dark, subscribe and stay with the channel. And tell me in the comments, what is the oldest living thing you have ever stood next to and not known it?